Speed isn't all that matters. Reliability is incredibly important, as anybody who rides the bus knows. And we know how to do that. We know how that if you give buses or trains their own lanes, they will be faster. We know that if you take streetcars, for example, and stick them in their own lanes in green here instead of shared lanes in red, they will be faster. Unfortunately, we don't do that. So here you see a map of recent streetcar systems in the United States and what's actually happening here. So there's real chances to speed up, make systems more reliable with simple things like how traffic lights operate and giving them their own space on the street. It's worth talking about capacity, but I won't spend too much time on it because ultimately this is where technical things matter. If you figure out what the ridership is, you can get the technical experts to figure out what kind of capacity you actually need. This is often not the driver. A lot of our focus on rail versus BRT, yes, rail has higher capacity. In reality, most lines don't carry that many people, so it doesn't matter anyway. But I do really want to bring up the last point, which is the legibility of a system. This is incredibly important. If we want people to ride transit, we need to make it easy to understand. We have a lot of bus routes that look like this, for example. This is not a transit system that's easy to understand. And we're also very bad at how we brand things. If you go to Germany, for example, every subway in the country has the same designation. Every commuter rail line in the country has the same designation. It's really easy to understand a system. It's really easy to navigate it. And we tend to lump things, both we do that wrong, but we also lump things together wrong. For example, in Pittsburgh, a bus that uses the busway and just a regular local bus look exactly the same. Good branding of systems to really tell you what kind of service you have can make them enormously more effective. It's even better if you get to use a dinosaur as part of your branding. But generally, the passenger experience of legibility. What does good wayfinding look like? This is Minnesota. What's called the A line. Notice it's a bus stop that has a name, just like a rail station does. Notice it has full information about the schedule. Notice it has a board which tells you when the next arrival is going to be. Notice that this whole thing is obvious and easy to navigate and easy to use. It doesn't have to be a train to do that. For some reason, we tend to treat different systems differently. And even how we map our systems, that for example, in Houston's bus map, it calls out which routes are more frequent. Red routes are every 15 minutes or better. Blue routes are every 30. Green routes are every hour. You can look at this map and make much better decisions about which bus to use as a result of that. And obviously, routes themselves are often way too complicated. This is a piece of St. Paul. Every line is a different service on the same route. So each color is a route, each line is a different service. And even little things like this early map of the BRT project here, where the eastbound and westbound stations in some cases don't line up to each other and have different names. That's awfully confusing. If the station you get off at and the station you get on at are two different names and are misaligned by a block. Like, making transit easy to use makes it much better for everybody. And there are actually huge opportunities there. I would say, looking at the busway system here, trying to really make that busway experience easier to understand, having clear branding, extending that beyond the end of the busway to the stops where those buses stop downtown or out in the neighborhoods would make it immensely easier to understand. This is it. This is what it takes to make good transit. None of this stuff is enormously complicated. And I would say, looking at Pittsburgh, there are some real opportunities here. You have a city whose density is ideally suited to transit. You have a city that actually has a good amount of transit service on the ground already, and some really useful infrastructure like the busways. So I think there's enormous opportunities here in Pittsburgh to improve the system. You already have a place where a lot of people are riding, and so you can make those people's experience better, and I think you can attract a lot more riders without having to build a bunch of expensive projects to do it. And I mean, ultimately, this feels like a city that can be a really great transit city. But a big piece of that is, don't focus on infrastructure, don't focus on concrete and steel. It's not the trains and the buses that are really important. It's what they mean to the people who ride them. And with that, I'd be happy to answer some questions.